Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed. And, of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube page. Well, we talked to him a couple of days ago, and here he is coming back, a 30-plus year veteran of the LA Sports Talk Show scene, as am I, and the only guy we say that we've never worked together, Steve Hartman and me. So, and by the way, I forgot to mention it in the last show, Steve. Congratulations on your election to the Southern California Broadcasters Hall of Fame, which was announced live on your Fox Sports Radio show.
It was a shock, Dave, and the reason I say that, the Southern California sports broadcasters mainly have honored the legendary play-by-play voices, the Vin Scullys, the Chick Hearns, the Bob Millers, the Dick Enbergs, people that, they've really looked down upon sports talk radio. They really don't know how to even classify it. A dear friend of both of ours, the late, great Joe McDonough, was put in after he had passed away. Mason and Ireland, who've been on the L.A. market for years. John Ireland, of course, also the radio voice of the Lakers, got in. And now me. So, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of great sports talk hosts in the L.A. market, you being one of them over the years. So I'm hoping that this is going to open up the window for more of our compatriots to get their just due.
Steve, I got my start in this business. I was working as a school teacher and a coach, and then I was a messenger driver, and I'd drive around town all day doing my messengering and listen to sports talk radio. And I'd say, man, these guys suck, man. I could go on the air tomorrow morning and be better than these guys, hearing all the mistakes they made, and they were dull, and they didn't have a good delivery. And then I went around, and I found out that you could buy time at KIEV, it was called at the time, AM 870. So I went around and hustled up some sponsors and bought some time and put myself on the air. That's how I got my start. How did you do it? I know you were on the school paper at UCLA and a college student there. How'd you transition into sports talk radio?
Well, really what happened is, you know how fate can intervene, and certainly it did for me. I was sitting in the Daily Bruin office. It was the year before I was the sports editor. The sports editor was a guy named Paul Farry, who's still been working for the Washington Post all these many, many years. And he gets a phone call from a radio station in L.A., right before the 1978 USC-UCLA football game, and the host of the show wanted to get the sports editors of both papers on his show. And Paul had no interest in doing this. And I happened to be sitting right next to him in the office when he got the call. He goes, "You want to go down and do this radio show?" I said, "Sure." Well, the host of the show was an L.A. newspaper legend named Bud Ferrillo. He had been the sports editor of the L.A. Herald Examiner. He had launched the careers of L.A. media people like Alan Malamud and Doug Kirkori and Steve Bishop. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so during that show, as I was sitting there, and that's funny because the sports editor of the Daily Trojan was a girl named Michelle Himmelberg, who did many years in the business. And he is a huge USC guy, Bud Ferrillo. So she was getting all the attention. I'm just there. And somebody called in and said, "Hey, Bud, Jerry Robinson, the linebacker for UCLA, said 3 All-American years. Any chance he can win the Heisman?" And Bud said, "Well, the only guy that really came close that wasn't a quarterback or a running back was a couple of years ago, John Hicks, the offensive tackle at Ohio State, finished runner-up." And I jump in. I said, "Well, actually, Bud, Kurt Burris was a center linebacker at Oklahoma. He was a runner-up in 1954. Alex Karras was a two-way tackle at Iowa. He was runner-up in 57. And then Tom Brown, who was a middle guard, offensive guard at the University of Minnesota, was also runner-up in 1960. And Bud looks at me, and he goes to break, and he says to me, "Don't you ever do that again to me."
Wow.
And he was not happy. So I'm thinking, wow, okay, that didn't go well. So I'm literally leaving as we're doing the show, and he grabs me. He goes, "I don't know how you know this shit, but I'm telling you, kid, I could use a guy like you." And so the next year I became sports editor, and after that, he was hosting KBC Sports Talk. Dodger Talk at that time was a huge show. And he hired me and paid me out of his own pocket to basically be his walking computer. I was his Rain Man. And I would sit there in Dodger Talk. I was 23 years old, and he paid me $150 a week, which doesn't sound like a lot, but my rent was only $180 a month. And he paid me out of his own pocket to basically sit there with him at Dodger Stadium. And if somebody had questions that he didn't have the answer, obviously it was long before there was any internet, any cheat sheets, I was there to give him the answer. So He became my mentor. He helped me get my PR job with the Raiders. And after I quit that job, he was doing a radio show on the Redondo Beach Pier, trying to get his radio career back going. And he brought me in. I wasn't getting any money, $0, 0 cents. I was 30, 31, 32 years old, making no money, covering every event in town. And then, of course, long story short was we got that phone call from the John Lynch in San Diego. We wanted to hire Bud Ferrollo, a big name. Bud wanted real money. He says, we don't have real money. And they looked at me and said, what's your name? And I got hired, and the rest was history.
Steve Hartman on Dave Smith Unleashed, telling some great stories about our starts in the business here. Let's talk. It was interesting when the Lakers announced that LeBron was injured and he's going to be out till November 18th with sciatica. I said, I kind of smelled a rat there because I have 2 herniated discs in my back, Steve, and sciatica. And to pinpoint a date like that sounds strange because, the back is an interesting thing. You can wake up tomorrow morning and be 100% healthy, or it can take 6 months. You never know. So to pinpoint a date like that was strange. And I said, I wonder how much LeBron is really hurt. I wonder if he's still kind of butthurt about not getting his extension over the summer from the new owner, Mark Walter, who evidently isn't kissing LeBron and Clutch Sports' ass the way previous ownership was. But then Kevin Garnett went on a podcast a couple of days ago, Steve, and said LeBron's lying. This is all about him not getting his extension and getting some revenge on the Lakers here.
Well, it's interesting, Dave, is that, okay, so we know that LeBron is not just going to announce his retirement after a season and say, I'm calling it a day. Oh, no. LeBron wants his proper send-off. He wants to be hailed for the player that he believes he is, and many people believe. I mean, you can talk about the GOAT, but you can also talk about resumes. And his resume has more meat than any other resume of an player. I used to say this about Kareem, but he's past Kareem. More All-NBAs, more everything, right? More points. And so he wants a proper send-off. The problem for him this year was he was absolutely notified, 100%, no questions asked, that for the first time in your basketball career, you will not be the man on your team, period. This is Luka Doncic's team. I'm sure Luka Doncic said, if you can help me, great. If you can't, we'll move on. And so that's where he's sitting right now. I'm 100% with you on this injury. From what I've been told, LeBron will never play another game for the Lakers. He will never play.
Get traded or retire?
Now, the question is, how is this going to end? Is he going to go somewhere? From what I understand, the Cavaliers are not interested. They have moved on. They have no interest. So where does he go? And if he goes somewhere other than Cleveland or finish his career with the Lakers, how is this going to work out with his farewell?
Maybe the Knicks?
Mark Walter, he's not into that ceremonial crap.
That's right.
He's just not. If LeBron says, all right, I've decided this is going to be my last year. I want to finish this season with the Lakers and call it a day. And I want all the bells and whistles that I have earned over 23 years in the NBA. And Mark Walter's like, yeah, that's it's not going to happen. This is not going to happen. You're not Kobe. You've never been Kobe. Not to Laker fans, you're not Kobe. And so he's really in no man's land. Because the only other team that would do that for him would be Cleveland, and they have no interest. They're not going to give up anything for LeBron James. I mean, there are teams that I think could actually part with expendable players, salary for salary. The Knicks are one of them. I actually had a deal with the Knicks that actually would work out where they could protect their big three, get LeBron, and still be there. But and certainly in the East, it's a lot more winnable, especially with all the injuries in the East this year with no Halliburton, no Tatum. I mean, it's there for the Knicks if they want it. That's how he wants to finish his career. So this is what's going on right now. It's like, okay, how is this going to end for LeBron James? And it's going to be in a way he wants, and that's going to make it very, very difficult for him. Not so much for the Lakers, because the Lakers, by not giving him in that contract extension, have already made up their mind.
Steve, as a young guy, you get a job in the PR department with the Raiders, being the media guy, and you got to have a million stories about Al Davis. I mean, the secrecy in the organization, having almost nobody on payroll, and his hatred of the media. And can you start with just a few great stories about you and Al Davis, your relationship with him?
Well, here's the reality. So I get hired by the Raiders in the summer of 1984, right after they had won Super Bowl 18. So I'm joining an organization that's just won 3 of the last 8 Super Bowls. And they had moved to L.A. the year before. Actually, the first year that they were the L.A. Raiders in 82, they were still based in Oakland. Remember, that was the shortened season with the strike. They actually had not physically moved to L.A. They only played games in L.A. The following year, they actually moved to L.A., and so I'm joining their second year in L.A. And think about this. The entire front office consisted of 7 people.
Yeah.
That's the entire front office. It had 7 people. We had 2 secretaries and a receptionist. That is the entire downstairs of the front office of the Los Angeles Raiders. That's how crazy it is. So it was very hard for him to trust anybody. So I worked there a full year before he ever said my name. And when he did say my name, it was just it was so random, where he just sort of, looked at me and just he walked by me. I would look away, and then he took a step back and he's like, "How's it going, Steve?" And so he would play mind games with you constantly. One of my all-time stories was we had made a trade to get James Lofton for the Green Bay Packers. And Lofton was up on charges. Some girl, he got a BJ from a girl at a club in Green Bay, and he blew her off, and then she filed charges against him and everything else. And this was pending when the deal was made. And so we had to wait until he got cleared of charges before he could come to L.A. And so at this point, I am like the sort of the pseudo spokesperson for the Raiders. The John Nadell of the Associated Press would call me. He sort of protected me. I'd give him inside information. He'd always say, unnamed sources, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, and so, I would get these phone calls, but I get a phone call the day that he's cleared of charges, and it was from this obscure paper in Milwaukee or something. And he says, "Do you guys have a statement?" I said, "Yeah, we're happy for James. We expected this verdict. We hope he's going to win a lot of football games." And so the next day, Lofton flies into L.A. And so he's in El Segundo. All the media people are there. The players are there. Everybody's there, all around. And you don't mind if I drop a few F-bombs, do you?
Oh, go ahead. It's a podcast. Dave Smith Unleashed, brought to you by MTS Transportations. And mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off on your next shipment for all your shipping, trucking, and freight needs. There's only one business to call, and that's MTS Transportations at 800-640-6873. MTS Transportations, 800-640-6873.
Exactly. So I'm standing outside the locker room, and Al Davis sees me and just makes a beeline, and he comes right in my face. Now, understand, this is not the crypt keeper Al Davis you saw at the end. This is a man in his 50s. This is still Al Davis in his prime. And so he's in my face, and he goes, "Did you talk to the media about Lofton?" I said, "I talked to a guy with the Milwaukee Journal." "Why?" He goes, "What the fuck did you tell him?" I said, "We're happy for James. We expected this verdict, and we hope he's going to help us win a lot of football games." He goes, "Win some fucking football games? What the fuck are you talking about? I want you talking about them great. And I'm being, there's dozens of people around, and he is just dropping F-bomb. "I want you talking about the fucking greatness of the Raiders, not about winning some fucking football games. If you don't do what I fucking tell you, I'll put you on the fucking slew. I fucking found you."
Wow.
So it right in my face. I mean, he's putting a finger right in my chest, right? So he walks around. I stand there, obviously stunned. Remember, I'm 27 years old at this point. And Al Locasal, the head of the front office, that little troll, he walks up. He goes, "You're not making it easy for me to help you keep your job." I go, "Look, I don't need your shit, Al." So I walk away. So for the next couple of weeks, I'm avoiding Al Davis like the plague. And my buddy Mike Setsuda, he used to be Bud Ferrillo's producer, but he was producing on KBC radio for Stu Nahan, who was doing the local Dodger talk show at the time. And Stu hated the Raiders, was always bad-mouthing Al Davis. And so Setsuda's on the phone with me talking about this, and then my other line rings, and it's Cheryl, who's Al Davis' secretary, and she says, Mr. Davis wants to see you. I'm like, oh, fuck. So I get off the phone with Setsuda. I walk into Davis's office. He turns around. He says, I hear that fat fuck Stu Nahan's bad-mouthing us again. And I'm like, well, I just talked to his producer. And honestly, Mr. Davis, I didn't hear it firsthand. And, you know, I'm just being careful with what I say these days. And he looks at me and goes, are you still upset about the other day? Oh, fuck, you young guys, man. I don't know. I'm telling you, Dave, it was unbelievable working in that organization, because I would tell people everything you've heard about Al Davis, the reality is 10 times that. He lived in a state of paranoia.
Yep.
He would remember there's no internet in those days. So he would subscribe to newspapers all over the country and have people go through the papers to see any mention of the Raiders or his name in every single paper on a daily basis. It was absolutely nuts.
Now, was he really the majority owner? I know in the press book it always said manager of the general partner, and the McGaw family had a big stake, and they would never release, him being secretive, they never released any of the financials of who really owned the team. Was he really the majority owner?
Well, he bought out Ed McGaw. So Ed McGaw was really the principal owner, but when McGaw passed away, Al was able to buy him out, which gave him, there was another guy named John Brooks who also owned one of the big shares of the team. So between the two of them, they controlled the majority interest in the team. And again, managing general partner was Al Davis's title. He was the general manager of the team, obviously, and basically ran the organization. He had no idea about business. None. The finances were so fucked up. That's why the Raiders actually moved back to Oakland. They were in such hock, so deep, because he honestly believed, because they sold out every single game in Oakland at the Coliseum back before they moved to LA, 55,000. They had 55,000 season ticket holders. They saved like 2,000 tickets for, game day sales, that kind of thing. He thought, honestly, because they opened up the Coliseum, the Rams had cut off a third of the Coliseum. He opened up the whole thing. And the year I joined him, we had 4 games of at least 80,000 for the defending Super Bowl champions, including 92,000 for the 49ers. That was what his big. He thought he would get 92,000 people every single week to fill the Coliseum to watch the Raiders. And when the Raiders started losing, they all disappeared. And so the finances never worked out for him. That's why they had to go back to Oakland. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So his wife, Carol Davis, just passed away this week. And this is going to be a big thing moving forward for the Raider organization, because the only way that the Davis family, because they own less than 50% of the team, was able to maintain control was because of the mom. And so Mark Davis right now is facing an uphill climb. The NFL is desperate to wrestle the Raider organization. They still have a very valuable brand away from an ownership that literally has no money outside of the value of the team. So they're trying desperately to wrestle the Raiders away from Mark Davis. There are plenty of people with huge money would love to buy into the NFL, obviously. And I eventually think this is going to go to the courts. This is going to be big time. But how Carol Davis survived all these years, I have no idea. But she passed away this week, and that is really the only lifeblood that Mark Davis had, the only way he could absolutely guarantee ownership of the team.
Well, you've known Mark Davis for years, having worked for the Raiders. You knew him as a young guy. Well, I don't know if you stayed in touch with him over the years, but what's he like compared to the old man? Is he paranoid? Is he kind of, I know the haircut is weird, but is he kind of weird and paranoid like the old man was?
Here's what I used to say about Mark Davis. Don't underestimate Mark Davis. He knows nothing about football. Think about this. All those years with the Raiders, he has been the only child of Al Davis, never had a job with the organization. Never. In fact, when I worked for the Raiders, and he's a couple of years older than me, we used to have this thing. So we'd have road trips. Obviously, we have a charter DC-10, and I had a manifest of all the names. One of my many jobs to make sure everybody gets on the frickin' plane. And there'd always be Mark Davis plus one. Maybe he shows up, maybe he doesn't show up. He would usually be with one of his buddies, and they would literally be absolutely tanked drunk in the airport, right? They just and he'd stumble onto the plane, and I'd check his name off. His dad never recognized. I mean, he had no relationship at all. It was this weirdest thing. But I knew one thing about Mark Davis, knowing him on a personal level. One, he was a pretty smart guy. Two, he would have a much better business sense than his father. Didn't know anything about football. Remember when he gained ownership, he brought in John Madden, he brought in Ron Wolf, he brought in all these people like to help me because I don't know anything about football. It hasn't worked out great because obviously the Raiders are a freaking disaster. But from a business standpoint, he's done a lot of good things, obviously, with the move to Vegas and everything else. So yeah, that would be always my recommendation to people judging Mark Davis. Don't judge a book by its cover. He is a smart guy. But unfortunately for him, every move he's made, including this Pete Carroll move, has been a freaking disaster. And it's unfortunate. But again, this is going to go to the courts, Dave. I don't know how he's going to be able. He's going to walk away an insanely wealthy guy, and he's 70 years old. So, I mean, what does he really care at this point? But the league is desperate to gain control of the Raider organization.
We could do this all day, Steve. We're out of time. I could talk. We can go on and on and on talking sports, and I always love to have you on. I appreciate this. We got to do this again soon, Steve.
Anytime, Dave.
Okay, thanks for tuning in, and that's it for Dave Smith Unleashed. And make sure you hear these episodes with the great Steve Hartman right here on Dave Smith Unleashed.